Hello again. I'm really very excited, and also I was a little bit surprised when I was invited to talk about mentoring, but then I understood that humanitarian aid volunteering is something that is quite new for a wider youth work world. And I'm very fortunate that I work in an organization called Gyumri Youth Initiative Centre. You will meet some of my colleagues in a couple of webinars. We are one of the pioneers of doing humanitarian aid volunteering in Armenia, and this was a really cool process so far, and I'm very happy that I can share a little bit about my mentoring insights. But also, yeah, so just maybe to say from the very beginning that this is something that is not carved in stone, and this is something that is my own approaches and observations based on the rules of the program guides. Yeah, so there are these program guides about both the volunteering and the humanitarian aid volunteering, but then every organization and even every mentor interprets that somehow as they think is most appropriate. So yeah, I would like to invite you to listen to me as my personal opinions on something that is a little bit beyond just me. I think why they invited me to this webinar is because I have a little bit more experience than this 1 year of mentor for humanitarian aid volunteering that started just this year. But since 2005, I've been very active in the field of international volunteering with European Union programs. Back in the day, it was called EVS, European Voluntary Service. So I've been a coordinator. Then I started to work with the Salto Resource Center as a trainer for volunteers. So we call it tech cycle, training and evaluation cycle. And also with some of colleagues, other trainers, we do trainings for mentors for the last years. I think we've already done 7 editions of trainings for mentors for volunteering projects. And then there was this moment in my life when I was already a trainer for this tech cycle, and volunteers always would complain, ask some questions. And then when I would give a suggestion or advice, they would say, how do you know you've never been in our place? So I packed my bags, and already when I was very near to turning 30, left to do my own volunteering in France in 2012. Which gives me a little bit of this multi-sided opinion and view on what mentoring generally is. I have prepared some slides to show a bit the difference between mentoring of volunteering projects, individual volunteering projects under European Solidarity Corps, and the humanitarian aid volunteering. But I hope that this will only open a discussion, and then we can talk about it together after my short presentation. So yeah, main differences of mentoring within Solidarity Corps, individual volunteering and humanitarian aid volunteering, according to me. I somehow structure this into 2 categories. Yeah, what are the differences of functions? And then what are the differences for the capacities? And I see your question about slides. Definitely, there is an option to send you a PDF of these slides. So for the light bulb, they call it. Yeah, this is the volunteering project, and this one with the task list, the checklist. I note the humanitarian aid volunteering because to me this is actually this difference of the approaches. For me, volunteering projects, individual volunteering projects, these are an opportunity for young person, the volunteer, when they go and they discover themselves, they discover their limits, they support the local community. But it is much more about the volunteer and the impact they want to have for their life and the life of others. So it's kind of this enlightening moment. So very often also the volunteers that go to volunteer under this project are young people that want to still find out what is their calling in life. They want to be in a different country, in a different culture. And very often even this is like a gap year program that many young people take to understand what they would like to do professionally in the future. When as the humanitarian aid volunteering, it's more this well-thought career next step. very often for people who are looking into professional humanitarian field careers. Yes, something that one of the participants, Anna from Ukraine, was saying. Many people have this aspiration to then go and work for Doctors Without Borders or some international organizations. And humanitarian aid volunteering is still a volunteering opportunity, but more professional, that can actually be a good jumpstart if you want to connect your life with humanitarian work. So when we speak about mentoring functions in regular volunteering projects, normally we classify them into four categories. And these are in the order of their importance, in a way, how much importance usually is given to one of these functions. First of all, it's supporting integration in the local reality. So this intercultural learning, somebody that can show you how to use the public transport, how to order a beer in a bar, or how to, I don't know, buy a SIM card or something like this. So somebody that is really accompanying you, supporting you in your integration process. Next is supporting crisis situations. As we know, mentor is this person that you can call if you have these problems. You missed your train, you need a dentist, something like this, yeah? Next one is this mediation in conflict situation. This is a little bit more, let's say, advanced mentoring that some organizations have or should have, but many organizations actually don't often invest in this enough. Mediation in conflict, meaning when the volunteer and the hosting organization are maybe not getting along very well, don't understand each other very well, mentor should be this person that has this neutrality and can bring people to the table to discuss certain issues, try to help them to overcome these conflict situations and become this mediator in a way. And then finally, which is really, really important, but very often, for example, this role is done by other people in hosting organization, not exactly the mentor, but initially was thought to be a function for the mentor, is supporting learning process. Somebody that can help a volunteer to set learning aims and help them to reach these learning aims. So these are these four functions that we believe a volunteering project mentor should be able to provide. Yeah. At the same time, the structure of the program for humanitarian aid volunteering is a little bit different. So the coordinator in a humanitarian aid project is somebody that is doing a much more technical, financial, administrative task. And the tasks that are related to the actual work of the volunteer are responsibility of the mentor. So mentor provides volunteer, apart from all these functions that I mentioned for the volunteering projects in humanitarian aid, provides also this task-related support and supervision. So these are actually the people who are responsible that the volunteer who comes through humanitarian aid deliver what is written in their project, what is written in their contract. And this is also really important to remember, because the profiles normally and tasks that are announced for humanitarian aid volunteering are a little bit more complex, and they usually require certain level of expertise, certain level of experience. Of course, again, it can be a wonderful 18-year-old volunteer that has the maturity, the capacity, the experiences to come and give something to the local community from their past experience. But usually, from my experience, the volunteers that go on humanitarian aid, these are people that already are there in their mid-late 20s, that already have certain work experience, education background, that are not surprised or not scared to be in more challenging situations. And given that this can be also somewhere very far away from volunteers' home, for example, you can volunteer from Spain and go to do your service, humanitarian aid volunteering service in Nepal. This should also be somebody that is emotionally ready to be so far from home and to support people that are living maybe in conditions that are very different from what they are used to. So mentor in this case is a person that supports their integration, supports in crisis situation, mediates in conflict situations, supports with learning, so with learning plan, learning objectives, and also on top of it, or first of all, actually is providing this task-related support and guidance, supervises the tasks, monitors the tasks, and also is very often very closely related to the reporting of the process. Do you have any questions related to the functions of the mentor? I will be very happy to answer those. Yeah, maybe you can show a sign or just directly unmute yourselves and ask the question. If not, I will pass forward and then we will have maybe a little discussion afterwards.
You just had one applause.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, then to provide, to fulfill these functions that I mentioned, of course, a different profile of mentor is needed. Yeah, so they should have probably different set of competencies, different capacity, and different affiliation with the project. So in volunteering, individual volunteering projects under Solidarity Corps, mentor is usually this friend, a person like a wiser buddy, somebody that is from the local community that has life experience, but also has free time to allocate to this newcomer person. And usually this is not a paid position. This is most often a voluntary job. So somebody who decides to agree to be a mentor to the volunteer in this individual volunteering project is a person that is really interested in someone from a new culture, is passionate about showing their community to a new person, has a little bit of free time. So this is also usually younger people, maybe somebody that is themselves considering volunteering in the future, or very often, and from my own observation, the best mentors are former volunteers, somebody that has been in their shoes before, and now they are back in their home country, and they are happy to help host someone in their home country. Whereas for humanitarian aid volunteering, normally mentor is somebody that is working in the same office with you. It's a colleague, it's a person that is paid to do the mentoring work. And there is even a separate budget line in humanitarian aid projects budget that you can budget for mentoring days, number of days for a volunteer per month. I can say from my organization, on average, it is between 4 to 6 days per volunteer, which actually means a very close cooperation and a lot of support. Yeah, if you imagine you're mentoring 2 volunteers at the same time, and for each volunteer you have, let's say, 5 working days, it means like half of your months you can allocate your paid work time to support these people in the project. So you are a colleague, you are somebody that is doing this not out of their free will, but because you have these regular hours. Yeah, you need to put into this work. And then again, organizations choose somebody that has the competencies relevant to the work of the volunteer, because one of your tasks is to support their activity, to support their work. As a mentor, you should be aware, you should know a little bit the topic, the thematic scope of the work of the volunteer to be able to provide them support. In my case, for example, we have 2 volunteers right now that I am mentoring in Gyumri in Youth Initiative Centre. I think I wouldn't be wrong if I say that you will meet them as well, not only our coordinator. And one of them is doing her project in the field of health, public health, with young people. And of course, I'm not a health professional. I don't know much about it, but I am professional in youth work. So I'm supporting her in designing her activities, in bringing her closer to the youth centers where she's doing her activities. And in this way, I can serve with my professional capacity to support her project. And the other volunteers project is actually supporting institutional development of the organization. This is also something very unique to humanitarian aid, that is not only you are supporting a larger community, but also a specific organization to become better at what they are doing. So the second volunteer we have is helping us to become more financially sustainable as an organization. She is specialized in social entrepreneurship, and I'm helping her to help us build good business plans to make our organization more financially independent. So not having clue in both of these topics, of course, you cannot just fulfill your mentoring duties, because it's not only taking them out for coffee or asking whether they know where the recent concert is. Yeah, it's much more about really keeping a track. And for us and our partners with which we work on humanitarian aid volunteering right now, we have multiple different forms. For example, monthly report forms, midterm report processes that we are in charge to do. Also, maybe another major difference is that for volunteering projects, on arrival and midterm trainings, they are provided by a centralized body like national agency or Salto resource centers. In this case, the host organization is responsible to organize on arrival and midterm trainings, which means that the mentor should also have some capacity in non-formal education to be able to run this on arrivals and midterms with the volunteer, for the volunteer.
Anna, we have one question in the chat, which is, do you know of any existing international database for qualified mentors?
I don't know of any such database, because again, it shouldn't be just a qualified mentor per se, but somebody from local reality, because these other functions of integration, of supporting in crisis situation are still very, very important. So it's not only about their qualifications, but also that they belong to the local community. They should be able to address these daily needs of volunteers as well. So it's more that if an organization decides to get into humanitarian aid volunteering, they should make their own database of their own possible mentors in their own community. I want to say also that I'm not sure if it's still there, but there used to be a capacity building project to support humanitarian aid volunteering, when newcomer organizations were paired with more experienced organizations, these experienced organizations being based in European Union, like sending organizations, these newcomer organizations based outside the program countries, in the third countries, so-called. And this capacity building was helping the organizations to really put in place different policies, different systems that can be later on helping to kind of host a volunteer. And our organization, we were in this kind of a consortium for 2 years, in 2020 and 2021. Most of the time, of course, as you can imagine, online. But we went through a number of capacity building trainings. We prepared very many different papers and documents before we could host our first volunteers. I think the process that you undergo in terms of this quality label, your possibility to host a volunteer, yeah? Probably you know about this quality label already. For humanitarian aid volunteering, it's slightly more complex. It's not at the national level, it's at the European level that you get your quality label, and they really come and check very thoroughly the hosting organizations, because very often volunteers are hosted in very fragile contexts, and European Union wants to be sure that this hosting organization actually will manage to do a quality project and that volunteer will be safe and secure. Safety and security, I think somebody mentioned in the very beginning, are very important pillars of humanitarian aid volunteering, both for the volunteer, but also for the context in which volunteer is doing work. So again, it can be post-disaster relief, but it cannot be that somebody is flying into a conflict zone or during an earthquake cleanup process coming to help. This is professional humanitarian workers are doing this, but then volunteers coming after to maybe help recovery process, or very often these projects are also preventative projects to make sure that this kind of things don't repeat again. Yeah, I would be happy to answer more questions if they come, because this experience is actually very intense right now for me. I'm not sure what exactly would be interesting and relevant to tell you, but yeah, if you ask me questions, then I can maybe make my thoughts a little bit more clear.
Maybe while we are waiting for the others, and I think the question will not come as any surprise. What do you think for yourself? What are the key? There's a question, so I'll save my question. What would you say is the? Katarina, we are missing the rest of your sentence.
No, but this is a good way of asking a question.
It's coming. It's
creating
coming.
A moment of suspense.
Exactly. I think it's coming.
The main challenges of being a mentor. Oh, this is a very good question, I have to say, because I think mentoring professionally, and I think, yeah, when you do humanitarian aid mentoring, really this is this kind of a professional mentoring work. Still, you are doing something with actual human beings with their own problems and issues. And sometimes it's very difficult to distance yourself and keep this professional boundary. You kind of want to still be more friends than colleagues. And it's both ways, sometimes unclear, these borders, both for the volunteer and for the mentor. So what is okay to do? Is it okay if I write to the mentee, or mentee writes to me over the weekend if it's not an emergency, something? Of course, if it's an emergency, you're available for them 24/7. So I think it's this emotional contact. You work very closely with somebody for several months. And then, for example, like I had a meeting with one of my volunteers this week, and very casually, as we were talking, we understood that in exactly 1 month she is leaving. And to me, this is very emotional, because it's not that you're working it's not that you're working with papers, with computers, or even with groups when you don't know them very deeply at a personal level. But this is actual human beings that have been a big part of your life for like 6 months, and then suddenly they pack and go. So I think this professional personal border is a little bit difficult. And another thing is, not always you have all the answers to all their questions. It can be questions that are cultural, because sometimes people coming from another culture to our countries, they ask questions that you feel not competent in a way to ask, answer, because you never ask yourself this question. It's not like if somebody comes to Armenia and ask me why you are doing certain thing, not always I have a reason, because we have been always doing it like that. But also it can be professional questions. For example, the volunteer sent me a budget for the business plan. I am very bad with numbers. And then I had to find somebody that I could ask to look into these numbers to give me a support. I think what is helping you with these challenges is actually that good mentor should have a big network, and you shouldn't try to address all the needs of your volunteer on your own. You can always direct them somewhere. So I know some really cool young people. I'm not so young to hang out with volunteers, even if I had the time. We have different interests, but I know like young people that are very happy to take them out, maybe introduce them to other peers. So this is really helpful when you don't put everything on your shoulders and you don't try to address all their needs. And this is also, you don't replace somebody for these people's life. You are not becoming their parent, best friend, I don't know, grandmother. You are their mentor, and you need to keep yourself in this limit. For humanitarian aid volunteering, I think because also the age of volunteers and this certain level of maturity, this distance is easier to maintain than when there is a volunteer that is coming for individual volunteering. But again, then I wouldn't be the right person to do mentoring for such a person, like a young person that comes on individual volunteering, because they would probably want to hang out with me and do things together, go hitchhike. And then, I'm not a good person to do that. I can be a very good person to sit, have a deep conversation, open a bottle of wine or something, but then you don't take your volunteer and get them drunk, right? So no, I'm not a good person for that.
I have a question, since you introduced the argument, the topic on humanitarian aid again, because I wanted to ask specifically about children, the role of children and mentors in general, or humanitarian aid volunteers. Because isn't it difficult maybe for a child to get attached to someone, okay, and then seeing from a perspective of a person who lives there, isn't it difficult to see this person who comes in a sort of way, helps you, and then it goes away. And I'm talking about children, because children are more vulnerable. Let's say they are more, they are more softer. Let's say, in a sort of way.
Well, a few kind of very maybe practical, technical things. First of all, in humanitarian aid, if you want to host a volunteer for your accreditation process, for your quality label, one of the documents that you have to mandatorily submit as a hosting organization is whether you have a policy of work with children and vulnerable adults. So this is absolutely mandatory. The second thing is that mentors' role there is to try to also help volunteer to keep this distance with their target group, be it elderly people, children, rural youth, or even an NGO colleagues. It's a two-way process. I would say that if the volunteers are competent enough and they keep their distance, the right amount of distance, the children would also understand that this distance is necessary. Sometimes I think this extra attachment is not due to the fact of volunteer just being there, but because volunteer does something that is maybe more than they should professionally do, which attaches this vulnerable group to them. So we have really a very well written out policy on how you behave with children and with vulnerable adults, so that you don't create extra expectations which you cannot fulfill as you are leaving the context. So to me, this is the role of the hosting organization, to have good policies in place. As a sending organization, if, for example, one day you will be sending somebody to go to, let's say, Georgia. We had, I think, a participant from Georgia, and there is actually a Georgian organization hosting humanitarian aid as well. Before sending the volunteer and upon receiving a volunteer, hosting volunteer, to be sure that you know how to regulate this kind of situations and to have all the policies in place. Volunteers always have to sign some kind of a contract, and an attachment to this contract is a certain way of a code of conduct, which, for example, is not mandatory for individual volunteering. And then one of the provisions in our code of conduct is actually that to respect these individual borders, don't get too touchy-feely, because then you cannot really control what will be the consequences of it.
Okay, thank you so much.
We had another comment in the chat that said that unfortunately or fortunately, the volunteering needs to be experienced yourself and cannot be learned from the paper. And Anna, we know that you were an EVS volunteer. To which extent did your volunteering experience help you in the role that you have now?
Oh, this is a cool question. So when I was going to volunteering, and this is a big secret that is already recorded, I had a very clear understanding on the paper what a good volunteering project should be like. Moreover, I was before an EVS coordinator myself, so I knew really what are the rights, responsibilities, rules, etc. As a trainer as well, I was training other volunteers about it. And then I came to a context which I felt would be like, I knew this project, I knew the hosting organization, and it was nothing like it should be on paper. Like really nothing. I haven't had language course, mentor. I lived in the same house where the office of the organization was, and it belonged to the director of organization. But it was like in a very well-developed Western European country. So I was even more shocked, because we always assume that, you know, when volunteers go to these third countries, bad things can happen, but you never expect that you go from your underdeveloped country to this super developed country and something like this can happen to you. I had to adjust very much to this situation, because not only that it was difficult, but also in my head, there was a lot of things like, but it shouldn't be like this, shouldn't be like this. For example, I went to my on-arrival training first week of my arrival, and it was in the language of my hosting country, not in English. I could follow nothing. I couldn't understand. So I had to really learn a lot in this process. I also decided not to quit my project, even if there were a lot of these red flags, because I felt like I'm given this one chance, and I have been entrusted a lot of resources to be able to do it, then I should get the most I can from this experience. And I think it really helped me to empathize more with the volunteer, but also to understand that not everything is this clear-cut black or white, that sometimes organization is not hurting you intentionally, but because their resources are also limited, that maybe your expectations should be very well communicated. If you don't have this communicated expectations, then you are more likely to be disappointed. So it was actually a very good experience for me, even if when I was going at age of 29, I was pretty sure that this will be like a little vacation paid by European Union, that I take a gap year from my work, go and enjoy life. But I actually learned a lot, learned a completely new language for me, and made amazing friends. And I know for sure what is the potential of 1 year abroad. So when volunteers come, I normally tell them that, okay, you think this is just like this, day in, day out, nothing is changing in your life. But if you put a little bit of effort, then actually this can be a life-changing experience. Maybe not for your career, but sometimes also for your career, at least personally. And I've never seen a volunteer that on day one and the last day of their service are the same person. And usually, really, they are much better human being. I want to believe that also I went out of this process better person than I went in. So yeah, I would say if you also are still in this time frame of doing a volunteering project, individual volunteering or humanitarian aid, and if you have this opportunity and you can allow yourself a year of not staying at home but being somewhere else, I think it's a good investment of your time in a long run. And this is also a good way to see what other career opportunities are there. Plus, if you are if suffering of other people or struggle of other people is something that resonates strongly with you as a professional career, humanitarian aid is good entryway. Of course, don't expect that the moment you go, you are this messiah that comes in and everybody was waiting for you to save the world. This is not the best attitude to go to a so-called third country, because sometimes you learn much more than you are able to give. But it's a good start to go and to discover your own limits and to go and help people that actually need your pair of hands and brain as well.
And the heart.
Oh, definitely. Without heart, volunteering is, I think, impossible.
Thank you, Anna. And nearing the end of our of your input, actually, and you have a thank for sharing your personal experience. Was there anything else that you had prepared for us in the slides, or we managed to cover everything?
I had one more slide, which
Okay.
I think is the most important one, is that every volunteer and every organization are unique. What works for me or what works for my organization, and in this particular time with these two particular volunteers, might not work next year with other volunteers in another context, in another situation. So it's really important to kind of communicate openly, sincerely, regularly with each other, the volunteer, the mentor, the sending and hosting organization, to structure the right type of mentoring for this specific person in this specific context. Sometimes volunteers come, they're extremely independent, and really your intrusive mentoring can have the counter effect. And sometimes volunteers are in a situation when they need a lot of hand-holding. So you need to be able to openly talk, to observe what their needs are, and then give them a very tailored type of support. It's not like one size fits all. You are a super mentor, and yeah, no, every mentor needs the time to understand this work dynamic with each specific volunteer. Yeah, I think now this is it. And if you are willing to stay in touch, I will be very happy. You can see my email on your screen. Please, yeah, stay in touch. I will be happy to support if I can somehow.